Hi, welcome. I'm Eleanor. I'm back in my library for a new series that I'm hoping to accomplish in the month of August. I hope to participate in what's known as the Seeley Challenge. Look for the link below. But basically, the Seeley Challenge was started by Nicole Seeley, the wonderful poet who wrote this book that I reviewed. Have a look through my videos if you'd like to learn more about her and that book. The challenge is to read one poetry book a day for the 31 days of August. I think this is obviously not going to be an in-depth review of each book. Absolutely not. This is going to be a little window each night as I sip on my chamomile tea before I get into my pajamas here in Australia. It's going to be a little window into my experience each evening, looking back at a book of poetry that I attempted to read somehow. So with poetry, you probably realize that it's a slow process. A book is usually read over a long period of time. You need to go back to the best poems because they keep giving you more and more as you go back. Well, it's also a fact that this particular characteristic of reading a poetry book stops people from reading poetry books, as it did me. So here I am. I'd like to read more poetry books, and I like to just simply read them and not without the pressure of always having to really study them and analyze them for weeks, months, even years. So the first book, and I should say actually, I'm going to try to take most books from my shelf, which you can see I've pillaged from my shelf, because I have quite a few poetry books that I have been meaning to read and simply haven't had the time. Or sometimes the inclination or the energy. So this is a book that I recently picked up. It came out in 2020, but I only recently bought it. And it came to my attention through reading the book Inheritance by Taylor Johnson. And somewhere in, I guess, the acknowledgements, or maybe in one of the interviews I watched with Taylor Johnson, there was a mention of Justin Phillip Reed, and I'd never heard of him, so I looked him up. This is his second, so the Malevolent volume is his second book, and have a look at this. I mean, just have a look at this work of art that is on the cover. Stupendous. The book itself is really quite beautiful, because it has at the beginning of each chapter a graphic, and some of the pages are black with white type. This book is a grown-ass book of poetry. This book is not going to hold your hand and tell you that it loves you. It's not going to say everything's okay and have a sip of tea and you wake up in the morning and everything will be okay. This is not an Ada Limon book. This is a Justin Phillip Reed book. Boy, if you like horror as a genre, you will love this book. If you appreciate language in and of itself, if you are searching the shelves for poetry books that have language, no matter the meaning, that the language, that the vocabulary is so unusual, that the phrasing, the syntax, the ability of the poet to embroider a linguistic world for you that is utterly new, and you simply can't stop reading it from poem to poem. If you're looking for a book that has consistency throughout, if you're looking for a book that you can read from cover to cover, this is it. If you're looking for a book that has a clear meaning that you'll get on the first reading, go get something else. If you're looking for a book that gives easy answers, go somewhere else. If you're looking for a book that does not have many literary allusions to other artists, other poets, other works of art, go elsewhere. If you're inclined to pick up a book and know that it will serve you for years to come, this is your book. Justin Phillip Reed is undoubtedly one of the most exciting poets I have come across. With this book, what was perfect is that it came at this time, this silly challenge, when I was forced to read it quickly, and that allowed me to get into the world. There's something to be said for pushing yourself to continue reading, even when you don't really understand what the poem is saying, very much at all. You get a couple of meanings here or there. Push through, push through, push through. And by the end of the book, I felt an immense satisfaction. It was a kind of linguistic massage that I'd experienced, as well as a hefty wake-up call about the way I had previously looked at language, the way I had previously looked at race relations in the world, in America, at the way I look generally at art. What you have here is a series of poems that describes strange structures, strange monsters, beasts, ways of looking at the world through alien eyes that actually start to feel like home. You realize how, as a white reader of very white poetry, you have missed so much about what's happening in the world, so much about what's happening, so much of the potential of imagination, so much of the horror of everyday life that Black people, Black artists have had to contend with. But it's even more than that. It's even more than that. Through the genre of horror, you're reaching a miraculous concoction of language, and it's wrapping its webs around you, and you probably never read poetry in the same way again. I will leave a few links below to Justin Phillip Reed's website, and also he reads on YouTube. He has a video where he reads the first poem in the book. And if nothing else, I'd like to leave you with the notion that social change at this time is urgent, and that means that our art is urgent, and it's important not to waste too much time. What the silly challenge is already teaching me is not to waste time, not to wait months or years before I read something like this, to jump into it, even if only for a first superficial reading, because they will always lead on to more and more and more art and more poetry. I'll see you tomorrow with my second cup of chamomile tea, which I haven't even sipped yet. All the best to you. Don't forget, the only real property is the property of the mind. I'll see you for the next book tomorrow night. Okay, the next book in the Sealy Challenge that I read was by Laynie Browne, called Translation of the Lilies Back into Lists. Laynie Browne is one of my all-time favorite poets, and this just came out recently. It only came in the mail a few weeks ago. The entire book is made up of numbered lists that are also dated, and a number of 5 or 6 collages that she made. This is a book, a postcard that comes with the book when you order it from Wave. Is it? Yes, from Wave Books. Yeah, I really love Laynie Browne's conceptual experiments. I feel an affinity to her use of language and the strangeness of it. I don't mind letting the words roll over, kind of go over me in waves. Sometimes I can see that the lists are, in a way, poems. They're poems that started as household lists. She has 2 young adult sons. She's a professor of poetry, I think at UPenn, and there are a lot of these lists also point to different aspects of her own personality, of her feelings and thoughts about things that happen to her that she might write down. Some of the lists are actually pointing towards her creative process, which I especially enjoy. And then, of course, there is the death of her beloved fellow poet and I think mentor as well, C.D. Wright. The book is dedicated to C.D. Wright, and she died in 2016 during the writing of this book. And so there is some of that comes through the lists as well. The lists are dated from 2015 to 2016. It was the perfect book for the Sealy Challenge because it really pushed me. It's quite a thick book. How many pages? 200 odd pages. It's a book that I know I'm going to go back to again and again, because there's so much in there that I just accepted, but I want to really close read maybe. But it's also, I'm so thankful to Nicole Sealy for pushing with this challenge, for pushing the limits of what we can do when reading a book of poems. And I highly recommend it. Okay, I'm going to go straight on to the next book, because as you know, with the Sealy Challenge, it's go, go, go. Okay, you snooze, you lose. Blizzard by Henri Cole. This book I bought about a month or 2 ago because Matthew Sciarappa on his wonderful booktube channel recommended it. He's one of the few booktubers that I've discovered. If there are more, please put them down in the comments. But Matthew Sciarappa is fantastic with the poetry. He has an ability to really summarize very well. He's very witty. He's very succinct. He is also quite... He can be quite humorous, and he says it like it is. If he doesn't like something, he doesn't like something. He'll explain why. I really admire him. And he brought up this book, Blizzard, as highly recommended. I bought it. Of course, I never read it. You know, why would you read something that you bought? You need the Sealy Challenge for it. So here I am. And I just raced through this book. It is a breath of fresh air. Now, I've never heard of Henri Cole. He's an American a writer who is also a professor, has had many books published, and this book just recently came out. I think, let me just check. When did it come out? 2020. And this is completely different. So we had the Malevolent volume by Justin Phillip Reed, which looks like this. And then we had translation of the Lilies back into lists by Laynie Browne, which looked like this. And now we have the very neat, almost all of them sonnets, very neat, very sharp. There's something quiet about them. I don't know why I'm whispering, but this book makes me want to whisper. It's just a pleasure. It's quietly inviting you in. The sonnets are generally not rhyming and not metered, and very welcoming. And I think the best way to describe Cole's work is that he starts with an obvious subject, great clarity, and then by the end of the poem, you think to yourself, what happened? What happened? What is he actually now talking about? You go back to the poem and reread it. And even though I wanted to quickly finish the book, because I'm all about quickly finishing and continuing, I did already go back and reread several of the poems because they're quick and easy to reread. And yet they also they blossom. Sorry, that's my doorbell. I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. One other thing I wanted to mention, the subject matter of the book Blizzard by Henri Cole is interesting in its variety. I think primarily Cole seems to be the kind of poet who notices a moment in his day, a certain thought, a certain feeling, but also like objects he sees, happenings in his life, and he writes about them. Then there's also, in this particular book, some of his memories of being a gay man in the 80s. He was born in 1956. So he was, a witness to the 80s AIDS epidemic. And he writes about what that was like and about some of his friends at the time. And then there's also this very interesting motif throughout the book, here and there, of the idea of meat, bodies, animal bodies, human bodies, and the innards. For example, in a poem, Ginger and Sorrow, my skin is the cover of my body. It keeps me bound to my surroundings. It is the leather over my spine. It is the silk over the corneas of my eyes. There's something so fabulous about that. Then in the party tent, he talks about a tent being put up in a field. And he says, with tightening ropes, I felt my heart accelerate, my heart that is nothing but a specialized nerve which my mind feeds off. Someday, nature's undertakers, beetles, maggots, and butterflies will carry it toward the sun. He has a way of talking about mortality that I really enjoy, and I'm definitely going to go back to these poems. There's a phrase he uses in one of the poems, I can't remember which one. The phrase is casket liquor. Wow. Okay, so those are the three books that I've read. together with the other two. So, and today's the 5th. And so hopefully I'll see you tomorrow or the next day for an update. I'll try to do daily updates, but as you can see, I'm probably going to bundle them. Okay, don't forget, the only real property is the property of the mind, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.